Welcome back to the Solid Verbal Boys and Girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrandt. That fine gentleman over there, the heart of the Midwest, the wiser of the two Solid Verbal hosts, Dan Rubenstein. Sir, welcome back. How are you, my friend?
Wiser? There are people shaking their head, pulling their cars off the road, pulling the emergency brake on their bus or train or whatever version of public transportation they're on, who are gobsmacked, Ty. Flabbergasted that you would make such an accusation on just to open up this show.
That's what you call a hook in the entertainment business. We're trying to hook people. We're trying to keep them around because we have this week 2 awesome episodes. We do this, through the off season. It's a long off season. We've actually got a lot of news to discuss here. We've been doing so as part of our bonus episodes and some of the other content that we've been putting out over the last few weeks. But we thought, why not have a super mega Q&A on this, the last full week of February. We got one today where we've got questions from the Verballerhood. We've got one that's going to drop on Thursday, also featuring more questions from the Verballerhood. Things that really cut to the heart of college football, where you can showcase your wisdom. Dan Rubenstein. We're going to talk
We're letting you shoulder the weight of content creation in these cold, dark months, is what you're saying, Ty, without saying it.
Without saying it, yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Solidverbal@gmail.com is the email. We got a bunch of questions that came in via email, social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. Of course, the Patreon Verballerhood. We always tap into that taproot.
Hey, sorry for the quick interruption, but it'd be incredible if you considered subscribing to the Solid Verbal YouTube channel right down below. Speaking of what, we're recording this on Monday, February 26th, right?
Correct.
That's if I have my dates correct. Do you know who has the #1 recruiting class in America for the class of 2025?
Would that be Notre Dame?
That would be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Yes!
Recruiting has peaked 10 months ahead of signing day for Notre Dame. Stay tuned to this feed. We are your Notre Dame decommitment center, Ty. We are the center of the Notre Dame decommitment universe here on the Solid Verbal. It starts today, Monday, February 26th, when Notre Dame recruiting is at its absolute apex, everybody. Okay, that's all.
Sad to say it's true, Dan. It's going to happen. Stay here for all your Notre Dame decommitment news. Yeah, that will not last, but hey, it's fun.
I had to, by the way, I had to check to see if Glenn Miller was in the public domain yet. The answer is no. Okay. The answer is no. So that is an old United States Marine Corps band ditty.
Beautiful.
Some sort of rag. But yes, there's your update. That's all.
Shall we dive in?
Let's do it.
Congratulations, Skippy. You've got mail.
You've got mail on the Solid Verbal.
Dan, as often as we can here in the off season, usually about once a month.
Yeah.
Like to pay homage to the Verballerhood, to the questions that come in, to the topics that are driving our beautiful, wonderful, semi-charmed kind of sport, college football. The first 2 come to us from Ryan on Patreon and from Jesse on X. I guess we have to call it X.
You do it however you want, Ty. It's your show.
Twitter. Zeets. Ryan starts things off by saying, y'all talked about your dismay with the news about another round of playoff expansion possibly being on deck in short order. Last week, we did a bonus episode. We can delve into some of those subjects here. He said, but ultimately you came to the conclusion that, quote, Saturdays are still magical. However, is there a realistic change in the overall structure or governance of college football that would make either of you legitimately lose your passion for the sport? That is a loaded question, Mr. Ryan. We appreciate it. And more specifically, as we talk about things like playoff expansion, I thought Jesse sent in an interesting zeet in which he said, why does the FCS have no problem going to a 24-team playoff, but when the FBS tries to expand its version, there are so many problems? It always seems like that's the case. So 2 separate, but I think conjoining thoughts here from Ryan and from Jesse. Playoff expansion, Dan. It feels like we just got this thing to 12.
Yeah.
And as soon as that happened, there was news last week like, hey, Bill Hancock had his PR statement that he floated out into the ether. Like, hey, they talked about 14. They talked about 14. We talked about 14 in our bonus episode. We can talk about 14 again now. I've been a big proponent of playoff expansion. I always thought 4 was stupid. I love the fact that they went to 12. When we started hearing about 14, though, 14 was cause for pause, my favorite pet charity.
Yeah.
Where did 14 leave you? What was that aftertaste like?
Well, it just is random, right? It's because the Big Ten and SEC had requested more automatically qualifying teams and trying to throw their weight around, which, look, when you sign the checks of the sport, ESPN and Fox, you're going to try to get as many of those premium television brands, in front of people when, advertisers are paying supposedly premium rates so that, ESPN and Fox and whoever else can recoup their investment in their rights fees. So it just struck me as nakedly commercial, and that's fine. College football has been in this direction, has been nakedly commercial for a long time now, but it made me want to focus on September through early December, late November even more, because as the questioner, I forgot his or her name, pointed out, that Saturdays are magical, that I think the sport by and large is still a calendar sport. It is still, if you are a casual fan, if you are a diehard fan, if you're a mainstream fan who just is perusing the TV schedule for that day, you look for team names that you recognize, school names that you recognize, and whatever little number happens to be next to that name, right? That Michigan, Wisconsin is 3 versus 9. Hell yeah, I want to watch this. Let's see what this environment is. Let's see how these quarterbacks are. Let's see how this game goes back and forth. And so that to me is still the main thing, despite all of the news about an expanded playoff or 12 teams now in the 5-7 model, whatever. It's fine. It's a bonus, whether you like that bonus, whether you like the model of that bonus is personal and whatever. There's very little to me, and I love the sport. I've loved the sport for some time, that yes, perhaps that game means less because you're like, well, both of these teams are making the playoffs, so the stakes aren't there, whatever. But in that moment, there's nothing better. There's nothing better than those, the stadium drone shot or whatever, the blimp shot, that you have, painted fans, that you have the shots of the tailgaters, that the culture around the sport is so, to me, bulletproof and rock solid, that it's people who are listening to podcasts in the off season that, and the podcasters themselves, of course, we are all the loudest about the issues that we are taking with the sport. But still, there's very little that can be done. Now, and you haven't experienced this really yet, but when Oregon kicks off at 10 p.m., 10:30 p.m. Eastern time, makes me care about Oregon games less. And maybe that's in the future with the Big Ten looking to expand their, TV schedule footprint, Friday night games late, Thursday night games late, Saturday night games late. That affects my enthusiasm for the sport, because that's my team on the West Coast that I'd love to watch at 2, 3 in the afternoon. But really, it's not an expanded playoff that would become a wet towel on my enjoyment for the sport. It's kickoff times and difficulty finding games, which I'm still young enough to know how to find streaming services. But I would understand if you are somebody who's older and is used to the sport being easy to consume, it being made more difficult. I would understand, be like, I'm not paying for Peacock. I'm not paying for Paramount Plus. I'm not paying for ESPN. I understand that frustration. And so I'm not there yet. I assume at some point that I'm not buying the Apple Vision Pro for $7,300 so I can watch the big Pack 44. I'm not doing that. There's still very little that can be done. But, and I'll finish my soapbox right now, if Oregon were to be terrible because of some change to the sport, that I'm used to rooting for a competitive team, and now because of the wins going in a new direction within the sport, Oregon's just a 6-6, 5-7 perennial type team, that then it becomes personal, and be like, no, screw this. Oregon's screwed, so I'm screwed.
Yeah.
So I think you have to look at it from a purely subjective lens. But for me, no, Saturdays are magic and will continue to be in perpetuity, unless my Oregon love is taken from me.
Unless your organ love's taken from you. Yeah, I mean, I find it hard to believe that anything. I was trying to rack my brain when this question came in.
Yeah.
I don't think anything is going to fully destroy that magic for me.
Yeah.
I will say, though, maybe just by virtue of doing this for all of these years, or with all of the business chatter and the TV revenue chatter and all of these things that have sort of seeped into the way that we cover and view the sport, that has taken some of the magic out of it. You know, you can only listen to TV revenue numbers and conference realignment rumors so much, coaching carousel rumors and NIL quabbles. You can only listen to so much of that stuff before it eats a little bit into that charm of the sport. And that's what the off season's for. By the time the games roll around first week of September, hopefully by then it'll be out of our system, reasonably out of our system. But it's hard not to look at the sport through a little bit of a different lens with all of this stuff circulating around it. And for me, that point was really crystallized when they started talking about this 14-team playoff. And, again, I was a huge proponent of getting this thing out of the 4-team model and going to 12. Because I always thought 4 was stupid. You've got 5 power conferences. You've got other...
Well, you used to.
You used to at the time when they came up with it.
Yeah.
You also have all of these other conferences that maybe aren't quote unquote power, but are still within the same subdivision, and therefore they're all supposed to be competing for the same championship. You can't do that with a 14 playoff. You never could. Why even have it? So
Cincinnati had their shot. Yeah.
Cincy had their shot for sure. But going to 12 makes a lot of sense. For me, always has. Going to 14, this is where I think Jesse's point about, well, the FCS goes to 24. Nobody talks about that.
But is that a line for you, right? Do you enjoy the sport less because of this conversation of going 12 to 14? And it's okay to say, yeah.
Here's where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
The reason that it works in the FCS is because the FCS, I think, is committed to trying to be inclusive.
Right.
Their model is based around the fact that we've got all these teams and all these conferences, and we want to give everybody a shot to play for the title. They're all within the same subdivision, the FCS. That is what is driving their expanded playoff format.
Yeah.
What is driving it on the FBS side? It's TV inventory.
Yeah.
It's money. And that's where I start to feel that ick factor, right? Like I'd be okay with the old Dan Wetzel 16-team model where...
Well, more specifically, Ty, not to jump in, but let me jump in. When you talk about TV revenue, it's not just for the revenue for the games, but if you were to go to 24 teams in a playoff, you're chopping off a game from the regular season.
Oh, yeah.
You're saying, okay, now we're going to 11 games instead of 12 in a conference. Like, you are dramatically altering the way TV inventory works and the way the competitive season works as well.
Absolutely. And so, like, I'd be okay with the old Dan Wetzel model, the 16-team model that Dan's written about for years. I'm sure he's altered it over the course of time, but 9 automatic qualifiers if you win your conference, 7 at large if you don't. His theory, at least at the time, when he put this out there, was in effect the same as what they are going for on the FCS side, which is it's less about TV inventory. It's more about including everybody and playing fair. Because, hey, if we're all in the same subdivision, if we're all competing for the same national title, we should at least be included in the playoff. I'd be okay with that.
But sometimes things are different, right? Sometimes different sports and different leagues and different levels are just different.
It's
and
fine to be different.
One doesn't work for another.
What makes them different makes them great. But if we're going to at least continue this charade of having a playoff because everybody is playing for a national championship, then everybody should damn well be included. Even if it means the first round games aren't as competitive as they probably will be this year. I'm okay with it because at least that is the model that they are sticking to. But this ick factor that I'm getting, where it feels like TV revenue is driving all of this,
right? That
to me is, I don't know, that's a little bit of that wet blanket for me.
But it's inclusion for the sake of inclusion. It's not inclusion for the sake of general, like, genuine belief in competitive balance, right? You're not saying that that Liberty has to be in this conversation because they went undefeated and then they lose by 45 to Oregon to the surprise of precisely nobody. And I think the problem is the way the sport is organized, not the way the sport.
Well, and we'll get to
that.
We'll get to that.
A postseason. By the way, to answer the question, like, earnestly, like, it did dampen my love for the sport when the Pac-12 dissolved. It absolutely did. It hasn't dampened it to the point where I'm done with college football, and we haven't actually had a season without the Pac-12 yet. We will in about 6 months or something. But that's the closest I've been to genuinely down about the sport, that the Pac-12 just can't exist because USC and Fox had enough.
Yeah.
And so that was the low point that I think I've felt about the sport as a whole. We're just like, we're just going to chop off a region because this school and this TV network found it to be advantageous to do so.
Yeah, I think
so
even if
that's the closest.
Even if the offseason and the playoff and all of the other money conversations go off the rails.
Yeah.
As long as there are still games on Saturdays, we will watch.
Yeah.
I will watch those games.
Yeah.
I hope that they can preserve rivalries. But to Ryan's question, college football has been part of me since I was like 3 years old. Mm-hmm. And unless something drastic, I don't even know what that would be, occurs, it's still going to have that magic for me, man. It just will. Maybe I'm a hopeless romantic, but that's just how I feel. Now, the conversation about the playoff, on our bonus episode, I thought you put a pretty good point on it by referring to it as basically the NCIS-ification of college football.
Everybody gets an NCIS. Everybody gets a playoff game. Yeah.
Right. Like, we know this is profitable. We know that this will sell commercials. Therefore, why don't we make an NCIS in a New Orleans area? Why don't we just put
Sydney,
one?
NCIS Origins. Yeah.
Origins, right. Is that the new one?
Shows.
That's the new one?
I think that's the new one. I haven't seen it, and I'm sure it's a wonderful show, but it's probably not what the original Jag was to the true Jag heads in the universe, right? Like the real deep on Jag listservs, I'm positive. Do you think a Jag listserv exists somewhere? Do listservs still exist? I don't know.
Somebody definitely has.
Is there like an IRC channel that's
somebody
just
definitely
deep
has
Jag talk?
A Jag Substack, yeah.
That there are those Jag originalists who lament the fact that NCIS has taken the Jag brand and driven it into the ground and commercialized. Now, obviously, I have no idea if this sort of thing exists, but yeah, the point stands where it's you take this thing that people love and you multiply it to see how many dollars can be squeezed out of it, even if creatively or competitively it makes the whole thing a little bit less fun.
Ben over on X.
Yeah.
Zeets to us.
I don't want to be zeeted on, Ty.
Do you think we'll see some breaking point with NIL? And what do you think that might be? Okay. We may have seen it over the last week.
Okay, what has been the lowest moment in the last week, in the last year, in the last 5 years, whatever? What has been the lowest NIL moment to you, if such a moment exists, right? That the assumption is that NIL is bad, which there are elements of it that have not been incredible for the sport, but net NIL has done a lot of good as well. So
I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's introduced chaos.
Yeah.
It's certainly a disrupting force in college football, but I don't think NIL is inherently bad. I think the thing that is inherently bad is what you mentioned on the last question. What's inherently bad is the way this damn sport is set up, or lack of structure, right? It's ironic in a sense because so much of college football's charm comes from the fact that it is scaffolding on top of scaffolding, the way that we've talked about for years on this show.
Right.
And it takes something like NIL to reveal that, and then to run amok because of it, to then turn some people off to college football, right? It's a double-edged sword. The engine is running here and nobody's behind the wheel. And that is the problem with NIL, because NIL now is legal. You've got boosters that are ready, willing, and able to pass around the hat. The rules are nebulous at best and apparently unenforceable via the judgment that we saw come down at the end of last week. And then you've also got the NCAA side of this, which is they're understaffed. They don't have nearly enough people to enforce the rules of NIL, or really just the rules in general. And there is an open question as to whether or not they even want to do that, because the NCAA right now is in this awkward position, truly between a rock and a hard place, where they want to put up some guidelines and some walls and some parameters for operating within this NIL world, but they don't want to enforce anything. They don't want to put themselves in that position to take on more lawsuits. And so it is truly a free-for-all right now. The ruling that came down at the end of last week, Friday, right? So traces back a little bit. There were some infractions or a notice of infractions given to Tennessee with respect to NIL and how they presumably handled the whole Nico situation. They fought it in conjunction with the Attorney General over in Virginia. They raised hell about this. They won. And at least at present, what the courts have said is that the NCAA can't enforce any of its NIL rules. If you're a recruit, you can, I guess, bargain directly with boosters if you really want to, right?
Sure.
It's a total free-for-all. And so the NCAA doesn't want to deal with more lawsuits. The NCAA doesn't even know how to enforce some of these rules at this point. And, so I think back to the original question from Ben.
What's a breaking point, Ty?
I think the breaking point, frankly, was when they introduced NIL at all. I think you got to go way back to find what the actual breaking point was with NIL. I mean, we're just going to keep getting stories like this over the course of time. These stories aren't going away. This thing is going to be ensnared in the legal system for the foreseeable future. The original sin was rolling this thing out. And I say sin like lovingly because I think NIL and players being able to benefit from their name, image, and likeness is a good thing. It's just this was almost rolled out too soon for college football. College football was never organized to handle something this complex.
Well, and collectives, go against the spirit of what
they
NIL was intended to be, good or not. The idea of a collective is not necessarily what the thought behind the NIL thing was always going to be like, hey, can I make money off of Instagram sponsors? Can I make money doing a local car commercial? Can I make money selling merch with my face on it because now I'm a star offensive lineman at Mizzou or something like that? That was always seemed to me to be the spirit of it. And then collectives purchasing the rights to NIL was a loophole, a kind of brilliant one, but a loophole that goes against the spirit of it, even if the end result is something that I think a lot of us are for, which is players being able to get their piece of the pie and are able to negotiate in a sort of free market way that they never were able to.
Way back when we had Matt Brown on this show, because Matt has, whether he intended it or not, Matt Brown, Extra Points newsletter, he has become very knowledgeable in all things court cases, certainly with the FOIA process.
Yeah.
We could talk about the video game next. Matt has been leading the charge with reporting on that front. But we had Matt on this show way back when talking about NIL, when this thing had not yet passed, when it looked like it was going to be on the horizon. And Matt said that NIL could go one of two directions. It could go in this direction, frankly, that we've been living the last couple of years, which is pretty much anything goes. Or it could go a modified direction where there are more strict guidelines in place. At the time, it was unclear as to whether the NCAA could even enforce those. But basically, it's either going to be strict and legal or completely legal, complete free-for-all, wild, wild west. And because they went the direction of just letting everything be out there and free and legal and let people negotiate on their own terms in the open market, it was probably always going to get to a point where it was unenforceable and total chaos. But I think we got there sooner than expected because of the initial approach to making this thing.
Well, it's also because it's legal. Paired. It's a Stockton Malone situation with the transfer portal.
Transfer portal. Yeah.
Right. That it goes hand in hand in that rosters are stripped. When coaches leave, obviously the new coach has very little opportunity to keep a roster together because of the timing of a new hire, because of the timing of players enrolling in schools, and because of the allure of this school is paying X hundreds of thousands of dollars or X dozens of thousands of dollars per guy on their roster. And at a certain point, it's just dollars and cents and really bad timing for a lot of teams. And so that has exacerbated everything with NIL, because as we've seen and it's been written about, like, the first conversation that coaches and recruiting departments have at a number of places with recruits, with transfers, is cutting to the chase as to what current roster members and stars and starters and all conference type players, what they make, right? That there is that cutting to the chase element, which makes things, I guess, more efficient on a certain level, that things aren't drawn out longer than they need to be in recruiting or the transfer process, but also very different, at least when it's been on the coaching and recruiting staff level, very different than it's been in generations past. And so I get people's trepidation with NIL. I get people not loving the chaos. I think the low moment in terms of transfers, and this is also opt-outs, which is like a close cousin of the NIL transfer portal conversation, was Florida State, Georgia. And Florida State not making the playoff, not seeing value in playing in the Orange Bowl, that being an absolute bloodbath of a game. Georgia, obviously, with something to prove, that they didn't make the playoff and felt that they were playoff worthy. They were going to do everything they could to blow out whoever they played. And the Florida State roster, seeing no Jordan Travis, seeing no playoff, just looking like a complete shell of itself in a still high-profile game. I don't know if that's the moment in terms of like the modern sport having its worst day. I think it's one of them.
Yeah, it's up there.
It's definitely one of them. And there's a conversation we had about bowl season. There's a conversation to be had about how the bowls are intertwined with the playoff and future playoffs, whatever. But in terms of the reaction I saw, I think that is a tentpole low moment, whatever that is, right? That was a deep well of a moment for the sport, just because we are used to the Orange Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Rose Bowl. And maybe you can point to like the Ohio State receivers who didn't play a couple years ago in the Rose Bowl, but it was still a really fun game, and that was kind of unaffected, and that's just due to Ohio State's receiver depth. But I think Florida State, Georgia was definitely one of those moments. We were like, I don't know who any of these Florida State players are. There's a bunch of third stringers. There's a bunch of guys who, opted out because NFL, because of transfer stuff, whatever. That's probably it. If we're going to go specific to what would a future Rubicon moment be for name, image, and likeness, it would be something like, hi, I'm DJ Lagway, and I'm here to talk to you about the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund, right? Maybe that's the line that can't be crossed. Foreign governments sponsoring problematic foreign governments.
Live college football. Here we go.
Right. I mean, look, we're already having conversations, I think, like about tennis going into that.
Oh my God.
That way, in the way that golf has been. So yes, if there's an individual, hi, I'm Jeremiah Smith, and I'm here to talk to you about Saudia Airlines or something, that would be like, I don't know how I feel about this step. But luckily, I think there are enough either official or unofficial guidelines so that a college football player is not promoting a casino, is not promoting perhaps unlicensed sexual goods or something like that. And then the foreign government interference into like, that's weird. Cal's spending $55 million on this recruiting class, and we're not sure where the money, like in dark money. So I think that would be a step that would make enough people queasy to be like, we should set something more official up. But otherwise, no, I think it's hand in hand with the portal stuff. It's hand in hand with opt-outs. And I NIL wise, seeing a Heisman quarterback transfer because of just a pure money grab, that if Tim Tebow winning the Heisman after his sophomore year was offered $5 million by a school by San Diego State, be like, man, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah,
this doesn't feel like this is the spirit of the sport in this moment.
His question is specifically about NIL, but it's hard to kind of, I don't know, itemize these things out because everything is so interrelated with NIL. It does feel to me, though, if you are one of the cynics among us, like NIL will be the monster that eats its owner.
Sure.
Like if there is going to be any kind of mass revolution in the sport and the way it is structured and organized, and we got questions about, is a super league imminent and things of all of these fantastical ideas. I am fairly confident that NIL will be the thing that gets us there because it's a money conversation. And it's a money conversation outside of the other money conversation, which is about conference realignment and TV inventory and expanded playoffs and all of that crap. NIL is, I think, more elemental to the way that the sport is set up. And if we truly enter into this world where it is more apparent as to who the haves and have-nots are, and if it becomes apparent that there are some schools that just want to compete on a different plane, that's when we start talking about a further breakaway state.
Right.
If anything is going to make it happen, it's going to be NIL. But as for the breaking point, I think we're past that, Ben. I think we're past that.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, for lack of a better term, kind of a victimless situation.
It is.
You can point to smaller schools getting their rosters gutted and it being that much more difficult to compete if you are UAB, if you are, North Texas, whatever. But the victim here is the school who's had this sort of sense of entitlement that they should always keep the same players for 4, 5, 6 years, no matter what, because that's the way the sport has always been. And now that they have a star corner who is being offered more money by a bigger organization, that they can then capitalize on their accomplishments. And so if that's the quote unquote victim, it seems okay. It's not okay if you're a North Texas Mean Green fan. It's awful if you're a North Texas Mean Green fan. But I don't know. The only certainty in life is what? Change. And it's either too much for you, understandable, find another sport, do your thing, or you just ride the wave and you try to focus on the good rather than the unfortunate.
We got a question here from Mike via email. He says, guys, I am very excited for the new college football video game. But, and this is good, since the last version of the game dropped, I've graduated college, settled into a job, gotten married, and started a family. It pains me
Brag much? Sheesh, Ty, come on.
It pains me to ask this because the NCAA game series meant so much to me in my formative years. But is this game still for me?
Good question.
That is a great question. So
what is your answer?
Well, we talked about the game for 45 minutes on a bonus episode.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks that listened to that episode contacted us and they said, you should really make this available in the public feed. Because I think it spoke to the heart of maybe this issue with a lot of the folks that have grown old with the solid verbal and tend to like our opinions on things like college football video games.
Speak for yourself, Boomer. Continue.
Right. This game has meant a lot to us as well. And on that episode, I think you and I talked a lot about what it was like just growing up with this as part of our college football fan experience. Before college, through college, after college. I told you the story about my roommate who pretty much dropped out of school to play NCAA and bartend. Yeah. And would simulate Penn State through 99 seasons, at which point the game would reset. That was what he did during the day. We thought he was at class
for the full saga. Yeah.
Yeah. We thought he was going to class. He was playing NCAA. It was very much a part of his college experience.
Have, like a family in the way that this emailer does.
No.
Question asker. Yeah.
But clearly had other obligations that had been supplanted by NCAA. So we're no stranger to this game. We're no stranger to this question. Let me kick it to you first.
Okay.
Because you are the guy with the family. And you are the guy with more responsibilities than me, the lone podcaster over here in Eastern PA, who doesn't have kids.
Down on yourself.
Doesn't have all those obligations.
You have a family.
I have a family.
You have familial obligations.
I don't have 2 kids.
I know.
Is the game for you?
Okay, so more broadly speaking, this is just a life philosophy that includes this question about, are you too old to play the NCAA video game because you have kids and a family and a job and a 401k and blah, blah, blah. Everything that comes with being a quote-unquote grown-up. I think you need to find stuff, no matter what your age is, that you like, that you've liked since you were a kid, that anybody who says something like, I don't know, grown men shouldn't. I don't know, a grown woman shouldn't. And you're just like, but I like comic books. But I like video games. But I like playing basketball with my friends. But I like the occasional Snickers bar. But I like, enter like kind of youthful thing. I don't know if Snickers bars are youthful things. Not a sponsor, could be. But I think that line of thinking is pretty silly. We're not around for a super long time. If we're lucky, Ty, you're around into your like 80s, right? And I mean, you're closer to that than I am. And I guess that's a conversation between you and people of your generation.
This is the longest running scandal of this podcast. You with the age thing. Continue, Mr. Ageist.
Anyway, I think if you love video games, you should play video games. I think if you love board games, you should play board games. I think if it's something that connects you, especially socially, to your friends that perhaps live in a different place, and you can throw on a headset and kind of talk shit while you play Notre Dame, Cal, while you play Minnesota, Florida State or whatever, in a dynasty, in a one-off, whatever, find the time to do it. I wouldn't do it like at the expense of health obligations. I wouldn't choose playing this game for 7 hours a day over working out or doing homework or doing, going and doing a good job at your work. But I don't think you should not play this game because you don't think it's appropriate for a 44-year-old to play. And so it depends on how difficult the game is. And we mentioned this. I hope there's a boomer mode that's just like just a 4 buttons and that's how you play.
A 4-button mode. Yeah.
That you don't have to recruit, that you don't have to set up, a program, that you can just connect to a server and spend a couple hours playing a video game that brings you happiness, especially if you're doing it with people you like. I don't think it's inappropriate for anybody of any age to do anything that makes them happy.
I think
that's legal and that's not harmful.
That's legal and not harmful.
Including yourself. Like, I wouldn't take this tact about like meth.
No.
You're like, well, I loved meth when I was 23. No. I think the NCAA video game series is much healthier than meth. You can quote me on the back of the game, Electronic Arts.
This is a hot take. Yeah. The button thing has definitely been a bit of a deterrent for me. And this does make me sound like I'm the boomer among us.
Yeah.
But I tried playing one of the latest versions of Madden, and there were so many button combinations.
What about other games though? Because that's like, can you play like the latest Zelda game? Or the latest like Mario Kart game?
FIFA's probably the best example. FIFA has a ton of controls, and it's taken me years to learn those. I'm still not great at the game, but I know how to do most of the stuff in the game now. It's just taken a minute for me to get used to that.
Yeah.
I found that when I tried to get used to it on the Madden front, I couldn't, and I'm not sure why. Maybe I just lost interest because it was more buttons than I recall. And, FIFA has always had a ton of controls. Maybe that's why. I don't know. They didn't even call it FIFA anymore.
It's like playing Dance Dance Revolution with your fingers.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's
on
very,
a high level.
It's very complicated. And I'm sure that there will be some sort of mode to simplify that for people of our elder generation who are used to a certain style of football when they pop the hood on this thing. Is this game for you, Mike? If you were into the previous one, and if this is something, as Dan said, that gives you life and enjoyment, or maybe a momentary distraction from whatever else is going on in the world, then why not? I mean,
there's a lot on fire out there, Ty.
There's a lot on fire. And look, I mean, back in the day, this is 10 years ago now, they had a way that you could connect with other people on the internet and play your dynasty. I have to imagine it's going to be even better now. I know it will be better now. And it seems, based on some of the reporting that's out there, that they're going to really steer into the dynasty mode, the online dynasty mode that many of us came to know and love over the years. Yeah. That is a great way to stay connected with people out there. And that can play at whatever pace the other folks in your dynasty think is appropriate. So do it. My $1 million idea, it's a free idea for the EA people that I know listen to this show. Need an app to handle all the recruiting and all the menu, all the administrative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You need that companion app
on your phone. Yeah.
On your phone. So that when Mike is at the office, maybe sitting on the can, I don't know.
Of course.
Just trying to kill time.
Maybe it's definitely when Mike is on the can. Yeah.
Just trying to kill time at the office like everybody else at the office. You can fire up the app and you can do your recruiting and you can do all the administrative menu crap from the companion app on your phone. That is the $1 million concept. That is what they should do with this, because if they do that, then it makes the whole thing more accessible. If you only have to log onto the console to play your games and you can handle everything else through an app, that's the move. So free idea, EA, if you're listening. To my knowledge, we are not yet in the game. We are open to those conversations, solidverbal@gmail.com, especially now that I gave you this idea for the app.
By the way, just while we're on the topic of free $1 million ideas or free $1 billion ideas, how about every brewery and every town that hosts bachelor parties set up an NCAA room? Set up like a...
I was drinking
You're
hot
spitting out
coffee.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Think about it. Austin, Charleston, Miami, Nashville, any of these places that have breweries, which they all do.
They all have
any
them,
place.
yeah.
You go to Portland, Maine. You go coast to coast. If you're doing a golf bachelor party in Oregon or something like that, there's definitely like a crazy cool brewery by whatever golf course people are going to for their bachelor party. Whatever people are doing. You set up a private room with like a 20-foot projection screen.
Yeah.
For like these 8 dudes or whoever, and you set up a PS5 and you have like, you know, you're bringing in wings and beer or whatever. You're having servers come in and out of the private NCAA room with your dudes. And it costs you basically nothing to pull off.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. And I appreciate the question here from Mike. I really do, because I think this is sort of the unspoken question that folks are asking themselves. We've had some folks on our Discord kind of speak to the spirit of this.
Would you do a reunion with your friends to play NCAA? Like, your friends are where? You're mostly in Pennsylvania, but you're like Virginia. Like, you're sort of in...
We've got friends spread out. Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to try and get the dynasty back together. I mean,
But are you going to try to do something in person? Could you pull that off and each of you be forced to wear cargo shorts or whatever you were wearing in 2003 while playing this game? Like, that should be like, everybody's wearing Hollister.
Right,
everybody's wearing cargo shorts. Everybody's got puka shell necklaces.
Puka shell necklace. You need the puka shell. Yeah.
You got some dashboard vindicated sort of wafting in the background somewhere. Yeah.
I think I don't know if there's going to be a reunion based solely on this. I think the reunion will happen online. I think there will be
digital reunion.
Some subset of us, or now, because again, we've aged, there will be some kids of former dynasty members who are part of the dynasty. There will be some version of our old dynasty that we boot back up. And that dynasty will be part of other gatherings, but it probably won't be the reason that we descend upon, Norfolk, Virginia, or Portland, Maine, or any of these other places where friends have gone.
By the way, another free idea while we're here. The EA NIL deal is what, $600 plus a copy of the game? And it's being pitched to like 11,000 football players, something like that.
That's not enough money. People are screaming online.
I mean,
screaming.
Money is better than no money.
They're treated like children. Do you hear that?
Don't take the money. You're now number 41 in the game. Who cares? Dude, make your own choice for you and yours.
Yeah.
I think there's a cool opportunity potentially you can offer some higher profile players more money. And if there is like a big Oregon Ohio State game Wednesday night, we could stream Dylan Gabriel playing against Walker Howard in NCAA as sort of like hyping up that weekend's game. And they get more money, you get more exposure for the game. People get to like whoever like the best high profile gamers are in the sport, which I know these guys haven't played an updated version of this game in a long time. That's a no-brainer for EA. It's a no-brainer for players. Make some more cash, stream it, and build up your following.
We have been a proponent of this game since the very beginning.
Yeah.
Like very beginning. We were doing our podcast in 2008 when this game was
I played this game in like 1998 on an old PC.
Yeah. Our podcast sort of predates all of the legal mumbo jumbo that ended up happening with the NCAA video game series. So EA people, reach out. We're open to any collabs that might exist.
Real quick, if you like the video, please consider subscribing to the full podcast at solidverbal.com, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. All the links are down below in the description. Did you play against your non-student bartender friend, or was he exclusively playing in his solo dynasty?
He didn't play any of the games.
Oh, right. But so you never played against him?
No, he didn't.
Not once?
He didn't want to play the game.
He just simmed the game so he could run the administrative portion.
he would have been a huge fan of Matt Brown's athletic director simulator game.
Right.
He didn't want to play the game. He wasn't good at the game. All he wanted to do was recruit and sim, and he did it. I told this story.
Isn't there a soccer version of that? Football Manager or something?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and you could do that in the current EA soccer game as well if you really wanted.
Yeah. Okay.
But no, he didn't actually want to play the game, and there were a couple weeks where he got through 99 years in 1 week. He simulated 99 years worth of the game in 1 week.
Me.
It's wild, absolutely wild. But he would do it on the regular.
It's getting married and spending all of your time planning the honeymoon and not getting to enjoy any of the tropical and interpersonal benefits of going on a honeymoon. He's like, no, let me stop you right there. I've just been looking at kayak.com all night, not a sponsor, could be, and I've locked everything in for you and whoever you choose to go on our honeymoon with.
But again, EA, listen to me. That's the kind of dude that gets into this game again.
That's true.
If you've got the companion app.
The companion app.
Think about it.
That's crucial.
You need the companion app.
The poop app.
Don't call it the poop app. There's still a level of marketing.
Let's call it what it is. When would people be actually using this?
The NCAA poop app. There you go.
Yeah, the NCAA poop app.
Hypothetical ACC scenario, Dan.
Okay.
This one comes to us. Yeah, awkward transition. Satya over on Patreon says, as a Cal and Virginia Tech fan.
Yeah.
Not going to ask questions, Satya. Just going to take you at your word. Is there a pathway for my two teams to meet in the ACC title game in 2024 or 2025? Aside from Florida State having a down year and Fernando being well above the Mendoza line, that's a Cal reference
Mendoza.
For those of you out there. What else would need to happen? I love this question.
Oh, man.
I love this question because it is late February and we're all running high on hopium right now. What would it take? I have crafted a scenario by which this could be possible.
Okay. Talk to me.
What we need here is for the ACC to be a complete tire fire, correct?
Yeah.
Complete tire fire. No undefeated teams. Everybody needs 2 conference losses.
And this is short term, right?
Short term.
You said 25, 26, somewhere in there. Yeah.
24 this year or 25.
Okay.
So everybody 2 conference losses, total tire fire, no undefeated teams. I think it goes without saying, as he referenced, that Florida State, not just Florida State, but probably Clemson, anybody who we envision as one of the top teams in the conference, maybe Miami, maybe Louisville, I don't know who else. All of those teams need to take a step back. Total freaking tire fire. The other thing that you notice when you look at the ACC for this coming season, not a whole lot of offenses that really scare you.
Okay.
Right? Not a lot out there. I think there is a case to be made that teams with really good defenses can muddy this thing up, right? You can Johnny Cash your way into a conference title conversation. And by that, of course, I mean the kicking and the gouging and the mud and the blood and the beer. My boy meets Sue, boy named Sue, excuse me.
Yeah.
Reference that I always call out. I think defense is the key here. So you kind of overlay that with the Virginia Tech schedule, which we talked about on a previous episode.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech has a fair amount back this season. And it is not, I can't believe I'm saying this. This is going to come back to bite me. I'm going to jot this down. We'll put this in our volcano. I'm working on the volcano, the Paulcano. It is not a stretch to me that Virginia Tech could end up in that conversation anyway, because they've got a road game against Miami the last week of September. They've got a home game against Clemson in November. That's a week after Clemson plays Louisville, which I think is probably a pretty big game. And then there's a bunch of games, a bunch of tweener opponents in between there that I don't really know what to expect out of any of them. I'm not saying Virginia Tech's going 9-3, but I'm just looking at this ACC schedule, and there's just not a whole lot on it that really frightens me.
Well, I don't think Virginia Tech is the side of this equation that's the troubling one.
It isn't, and I'm getting to Cal.
Okay.
All right, so Tech, I think, is you don't need to squint too hard to come up with a scenario in which maybe Virginia Tech is in that conversation. The Cal portion of this, that gets a little dicey. The Cal schedule is certainly not as workable, but it's also not a nightmare. It's not a nightmare in terms of opponents. it is a nightmare in terms of travel, right? Because of this new arrangement, they're taking 3 trips, I believe, to the East Coast, Florida State, Pitt, and Wake Forest throughout various portions of the season. They've also got a trip at the beginning of the year to Auburn and then a trip to SMU towards the latter part of the year. So that's a lot of travel that they're going to have to contend with. But to Satya's point, like if Fernando Mendoza isn't a disaster, or whoever the quarterback is not a disaster, and they can find a way to mount offense, and if we can get back to like the good old days of Cal playing defense, which was like 4 years ago now, I guess.
Yep. It's been a minute.
If you can muddy it up enough to keep things interesting, and if the rest of the conference is down, I don't think this is a crazy hypothetical. I don't think it's likely. But I think you could put together a reasonable set of circumstances by which we're talking about Cal and Virginia Tech. Maybe not in the game, but as part of the conversation around who gets into the game. I think it's possible.
I think you're kind of full of S.
Of course I'm full of it.
Okay.
This is a hypothetical, but where was I wrong with any of that stuff that I said?
No, I mean, you can talk yourself into Virginia Tech growing into something interesting after, the back half of their 2023. But really, it's the Cal component of this. And Fernando Mendoza had moments, but they lost their offensive coordinator, Jake Spavital, to, I think, Baylor? Yes?
Yep.
So starting over there. I think what Cal needs is they need the other shoe to drop. And more specifically, Tony Shu, founder of DoorDash, worth upwards of $2 billion. And we need to make it rain up in Berkeley. So
that would be a wonderful NIL opportunity.
Right?
College
DoorDash?
kids and DoorDash? Are you kidding me?
College kids, DoorDash, Tony Shu, worth billions of dollars
What's
allegedly.
he doing? Why isn't he contributing?
Well, suddenly you're flying players on the nicest charter back and forth across the country. And so perhaps they're getting more rest. Perhaps it's more meaningful. Maybe there are tutors aboard to keep them locked in on academics, where it's very important at Cal, obviously. And you just say, hey, for the next 2 years, we are spending $45 million a year on the roster, thanks to Tony Shu, DoorDash.
It's perfect.
That's the thing I believe more than Cal could muck it up. Who knows? The ACC's wide open.
I didn't use that voice.
That's what I heard. That was the voice. That was the Charlie Brown wah, wah, wah voice I heard, because it's not happening for Cal short of some sort of transformational finances.
What if Justin Wilcox turns Cal into Iowa West? What if
Cal into Iowa West? But what you're doing is you're saying that like what Iowa's done is replicable with Phil Parker.
It's not. But this isn't replicable either. Any of the stuff that I've described. In a hypothetical universe where Cal and Justin Wilcox fully commit to the defensive bit.
Yeah.
And they have something of a workable offense. All right. Not much, but just enough to make things interesting and win a bunch of close games because of their defense. Because again, look at the offenses in the ACC this year. Look at them.
I think you're better off taking Tony Shu, flying him to Iowa City, and buying Iowa's returning defensive players than hypothetically turning Cal into Iowa, giving Phil Parker $7 million, and saying live in the Bay Area for 2 years. That's it. Here's $14 million to live in the Bay Area for 2 years. With that, you can afford a small studio condo in San Francisco. I think that's the actual, if we're going to talk about realistic paths, that's probably the move to do. And you're probably getting rid of Justin Wilcox and spending a ton of money on whoever, on Nick Saban, available, and giving him $45 million to play with. That's the quicker path to me than just heaving the weird things happen ball up in the air.
Final question.
It just takes money, Ty. It just takes money.
Final question.
Yeah.
On this
good golf up there for Nick Saban, right?
Yeah. You want to hire Nick Saban?
That's what I'm saying. Get rid of Justin Wilcox. Throw $18 million at Nick Saban, and have an assistant pool of another 18.
I'm still waiting for somebody to try
Strawberry
this.
Canyon.
Somebody needs to try this. Eventually somebody will. I mean, we're talking all these NIL circumstances here.
Yeah.
We need some dark horse program with a rich booster to just decide that they want to be part of college football on the championship level. And
give Adam Duritz a half hour in a room with Tony Hsu, counting crows. That's all it takes.
All right. Final question here for part 1.
Yeah.
This is from C. Whelan 88 on Instagram.
Okay.
This is a question for you, Dan, and this sort of puts a nice little bow on everything that we do here on the
just
Solid
a question
Verbal.
for me.
Well, we can both talk it through. The question
Yeah.
is, if Florida football was a pizza topping, which would it be?
If Florida football were a pizza topping, which would it be? So you have to figure out a way to define Florida football in a way to connect it to a pizza topping. So
I think that's right.
More broadly speaking, yeah.
So where is Florida football at right now? Florida football, I think, is trapped in this perpetual state of wanting to be more than it is.
Yeah.
And there is clearly disappointment among the fan base.
Yeah. A lot of different ingredients inside, not really working, different coaches. Yep.
So there's a lot going on, but I think the common thread seems to be expectations are vastly superior to the actual product. Which pizza toppings for you speak to that delta?
Well, I don't think the expectations are unreasonable. Maybe the expectations for Billy Napier's Florida are unreasonable, but for a program, the University of Florida, given local talent, given now ancient history going back to the mid-aughts, to 2006 and 2008 were the championship seasons. Given some of the recruiting classes, given some of the coaches that they've attracted in a good way, Spurrier and Urban, give even some recent results. Recent defenses have been extremely strong. The best of Dan Mullen's Kyle Trask era was an SEC East champion. Yes, played in a very entertaining SEC championship game. That there's a lot to like about this topping, this component. But perhaps the expectation of performance given current circumstances, I'd say meatballs. Meatballs on pizza. I think meatballs don't really have a good place on pizza. I think they tend to dry out. I think it's a little too hefty for a thin pizza, and I think pizzas are better served with thinner or smaller cut meats or vegetables. And if you slice a meatball, I think I'd much rather just have like sausage or pepperoni or something, or some sort of Italian cured meat. It just doesn't quite work, even though everybody loves meatballs that eats meat and everybody loves pizza. And so why not put those two together? And I think it's a similar fit to Billy Napier, the worst of Will Muschamp, the worst of Dan Mullen, the worst of Jim McElwain, that I just think fit wise, it doesn't make sense on pizza, a meatball.
I think it's Canadian bacon.
Okay. High profile with the Hawaiian pie. Yeah.
Not a fan of bacon just in general on pizza. I
think better uses in
you've got
other
better options,
contexts.
right?
Yeah.
You've got pepperoni, you've got sausage. For me, those are both better options than bacon or Canadian bacon. I don't really like Canadian bacon, but
yeah.
I think for me, it's one of those deals where it sounds good, and then you try it and you don't get a whole lot out of it.
I like a good chicken and bacon pizza, chicken bacon ranch, something like that. That can work well.
Too much. Too much? No, I don't need that much on my pie.
I mean, look, I like
don't
a
need
plain
it.
pie. I like pepperoni. That's basically it at this point. But yeah, I think the Canadian bacon's a good answer. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like the potential seems very high for Florida, but nobody seems to be able to get it right, at least not lately. And that to me is meatball.
Write in solidverbal@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on this and other pressing college football subjects.
The beauty of a meatball is that it's a ball, and you can't put the full ball on a pizza. So then you're having meatball slices or meatball chunks, and it's getting away from the main thing. Ty.
Right. Keep the main thing the main thing.
Keep them, like, you get that good red sauce or sweet sauce, however you like your meatballs, and just let those breathe. Let your balls breathe, Ty. That's what we always say on the show.
All right. Why don't we go out on that note
Yeah.
I am Ty Hildenbrand. He's Dan Rubenstein. Verballers.com is our Patreon. That's where you can go and get bonus episodes, bonus perks all throughout the college football season. VERBALLERS.com. Bonus eps, ad-free episodes, and whatnot. Just go and check that out. Hit subscribe or follow if you have yet to
That
do
helps.
so, wherever it is that you are listening or watching this podcast. Again, 2 episodes per week all throughout the college football off season. We've got a part 2 of this episode coming up on Thursday. We're going to talk a little bit more about that Big Ten SEC dynamic that seems to be gaining in prominence wherever you read about college football, specifically about the sport and how it's governed and run and the structure within college coach trends, which is another hot button issue at the moment. And I think we're going to dip our toe in the way too early top 25s that are out there. We got a
Really?
question- Yeah,
Okay.
we got a question from Kenneth out on Twitter about that, and I thought it was an interesting way to digest where things stand here in the college
Okay.
football offseason. So we got that. We've got some other stuff that we'll talk about on the next episode. But in the meantime, again, make sure you hit subscribe or follow. Make sure you tell your friends. We'll be with you all throughout the college football offseason. Dan Rubenstein, I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Oh, okay.
For that guy over there, Dan, for myself, Ty, talk to you soon. Stay solid.
Peace.